You'll find a lot of material online that will describe digital transformation as a cultural change more than it is a technical change. It changes behaviors and beliefs of an organization to adopt new ways of working and new approaches to their customer. Now, because of that, there's a really big challenge along the way when you start thinking about culture and a way that an organization operates. Organizations, like any body, has an immune system. But when we consider the immune system and what makes up the organizational immune system, it gives us strategies and approaches to think about digital transformation in a different way. So today I'm going to talk about the organizational immune system, why it's so important, and how you can start to develop strategies to build into your transformation initiatives. So new employees joining an organisation will go through an onboarding process that helps them understand the ways of working, the beliefs, the values, the strategy and culture of an organisation so that they can slot in and become an effective and successful employee. Organisations, though, also have all of these mechanisms built into their way of working that take their value and belief system and build their processes, structures and their way of working that sustains that culture as part of their operating model. Now, some of these are formal and some of them are informal, but they're there in a natural way to help a organisation culture sustain itself and prevent disruption. Because and the maintenance of that cultural equilibrium is quite important for an organisation. And a culture has a natural way and a natural immune system to things that will run counter to that. Now, this is quite important when it comes to digital transformation because, as we've said before, digital transformation is more than just a change. It's actually altering a way of working and the beliefs of an organisation to quite a broad extent. So understanding the organisational immune system and how that can impact change and how it can impact your transformation is quite important in helping you understand and designing strategies to deal with it. Now, as I've been thinking about this, I think what I start to realize is there's some fundamental components in the way an organization operates. And there's certainly the way that it thinks about technology and the way that it thinks about integration and collaboration across an organization that are really key for your digital transformation and your way of working moving forward. And if you don't think about those process elements in light of that, they are effectively your organizational immune system. They will prevent you embodying the behaviors and the change that you're looking for in an organization. So really, some of those components that we think about that make up the organization immune system. So one of them is around the control systems. These are the processes that you operate. It might be your approval processes. It might be your hierarchies. It might be a technical change control process that you have to go through, or a technical standard that you apply. These are all control systems that embody your way of working, whether that's a hierarchical control structure, whether it's a risk averse or a risk aware or a risk management approach. The control systems will embody your belief system. So if you've got a risk averse organizational culture, your control system will be created around a risk averse culture. It will be slow, it will be sensitive, and it will think about things to a great extent before allowing you to move forward. The elements that go alongside that, though, are the organizational structures and the power structures. So organizational structures really is how you organize yourself, whether that's a hierarchical or whether it's a relatively flat structure. That's quite important from the control system perspective, because obviously in largely hierarchical organizations, you see the control structures to be replicating that hierarchical structure and approvals being escalated up to senior management for approval and really disempowering the worker at the lower level to a large extent. Similarly, power structures go alongside that because you can have formal power structures and informal. The formal power structures go with that hierarchical position. It might be financial delegations, it might be team management and those sorts of elements. The informal structures, though, are they're the knowledge experts. They're the people that have been in an organisation, highly regarded, respected, know what they're doing. They tend to be in the middle of all the things that happen in an organisation because they've got that background, that information, and that respect within an organisation. They are an informal power structure within an organisation that you have to be aware of. In technical environments, I think one of the ones that we come across quite often is the single point of excellence, that one person that understands the system, understands the complexity, and nobody else does. Really, that person is a power structure for that system. Nothing can happen unless that person wants to do it. So that's quite important when you're thinking about digital transformation and moving in a different direction at pace in a different way. Having those informal power structures in place actually can be a benefit, but also can be quite a challenge. Another element is the symbols. I think here it could be corporate branding, it could be your values posters, it could be even simple things like I've been in organisations that said, clean wall policy, you're not allowed post-its and things like that up on walls. In modern ways of working, post-its are fundamentally in the way that we work. Post-its are everywhere. So being in an organisation that says, no, you can't have anything like that is actually quite problematic. Runs counter to the behaviours that we're actually looking for in a number of circumstances. So some of those symbols and the ways of working, it could also be the way that you organise your desks, it could be the layout of the organisation, it could even be a clothing standard or those sorts of elements. They all provide symbols in the way that your organisation operates and the values that it has. One of the other elements is the rituals and routines. Rituals and routines are quite important because they demonstrate a way of working and a way of operating for an organisation. One of the big routines I think a lot of organisations challenge with is meetings. I think there's not many people in the world that would say they don't have enough meetings. There's lots of organisations that have meeting-based culture. And over COVID, I think over the last couple of years, although people have started to adopt new collaborative capabilities and new video-based and remote working technologies, it's largely maintaining that same meeting-based way of working. It's still within that same operating metaphor. They're not using these collaborative capabilities to be more open, transparent, and making their work more visual. All they're actually doing is slotting them in where you can't be sat in a meeting room, you're now sat in front of a camera. Another element here as well, though, is a simple one that, if you've got employees that turn up for work 15 minutes late every single day, that's a routine that has been established, and that's part of the operating culture, that turning up late to meetings, turning up late for work is actually an accepted organisational behaviour. Whether you want that or not, that's another question. But actually, that is a routine that's been established. And the final one, I think, just to touch on, is the myths and stories in an organisation. I think one of those classic ones is we tried this 10 years ago, it didn't work, so it's not going to work for us again. That's usually a way of trying to stop change or think of different solutions. But actually, that is a myth that is generated. Technology 10 years ago is completely different to technology today. The stories as well. I think being able to talk about ways of working and how you're operating is quite important for people, because unless you've got a positive story around a change, it really, how do you sell it to staff? How do you get staff really excited and engaged and encouraged to participate? So creating those stories are quite important. So as you're thinking about your digital transformation, it's quite important to think about all of those different elements. And when you think about the type of organisation you're trying to transform into, what are the things that you have to do in there to create a different immune system? Effectively, we're inoculating the organisation to give it a different set of antibodies so that it can actually fight a different illness. And the illness we're trying to fight is legacy. We're trying to move to a completely different place here. So you start at the top there. Part of the element is, how are you going to create new stories around your digital transformation, new positive stories? Now, some organizations, the way they do this is use innovation groups. They create these environments where people can innovate and try new technologies and new ways of working. They can have a benefit in creating some stories, but what you then run into is trying to feed those stories back into the organization. Guess what? You hit the organization immune system. So you have limited success. And my experience is that these sorts of groups have limited success in trying to bring those new capabilities and new ways of working back into the organization because of this organizational immune system. So it's important, I think, that when you think about stories and myths, they have to be created around your mainstream operation, your business. It's no good creating an innovation group over the side, because that's not what people are doing. It's good for those people, but it's not the customer facing element that you're trying to work with and that you're trying to transform. So those stories have to be relevant for the people. Your power structures and organization structures, that's quite important as well, that you think about those. Now, we all say don't start any sort of transformation with a restructure, but actually you have to start to think about it. Do the structures and the power structures support the change you're looking for, or actually do they hinder it? If they hinder it, you have to think about that quite hard, and you're going to have to do something about that. Especially the informal structures, because sometimes you can, certainly in technical terms, you can get those people that have been in an organization for 30 plus years working on the similar sort of system, very comfortable with the technology and excellent at dealing with it and working with it and understand everything about it. But is that a technology you want to move forward with? If it is, great, you've got an excellent resource there. If it's not, you've got to think about how do you change that, and how do you go about changing that informal power structure that will allow you to bring on that new technology. Similarly, your control systems. If you're talking about creating an agile, adaptive organization, what do your control systems need to look like? In technical terms, if you've got a technical change control board and those sorts of elements, having every single technical change having to go through a technical control board before it's signed off, before anybody's allowed to do any work and go through that, creates a hierarchical bureaucracy that slows things down. I've seen in organizations a release process where effectively a release has to be submitted. There's then a wait period until that release can be authorized and then actually implemented in production. Again, that creates slow delay that actually has no business value whatsoever. So thinking about those, you can't be going to a team saying you're agile, adaptive, and you're working at pace. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to make you go through this bureaucratic, slow approval process once you're finished. That's probably going to take you longer than actually doing the work that you've just done anyway. So you have to think about those. If you want an adaptive organization, having an entire investment life cycle that is, you're doing waterfall planning once a year doesn't quite fit the type of organization and the characteristics and the behavior that you're looking for. So it's quite important to look at those and how are you going to create new control systems that will embody the behaviors you're looking for. I think this is one key area, because I think a lot of the processes that we follow are built around a capital-based model that really isn't where digital transformation is going. We know digital transformation using a lot more cloud-based services and those sorts of activities. We're moving away from a capital-based model into an operating funding-based model. And this is creating a lot of problems because our control systems around investment and finance are built around capital investment. They're not built around trying to do things quickly and using operating money. And actually, though, because of that, what we're seeing is almost a loss of control within that operating environment. So from a technical perspective, an infrastructure person with the right accesses could add a lot of resource, CPU or memory to a server that could actually add considerable cost to an organization with no capital approval or oversight whatsoever. So thinking about those control systems actually is quite important, I think. Not just from a standpoint of do they embody the behaviors you're looking for, but also are they effective? And I think a lot of those older processes just aren't effective anymore. And the rituals and routines as well. I think thinking about what are the new rituals and routines that will embody the new way of working. I think a lot of teams that go agile, they're doing a lot of the ceremonies. They're usually doing daily stand-ups and those sorts of things. But in a continual learning environment, the retrospectives are actually vitally important to all of this. But actually, what I find is a lot of organisation, it's retrospective is the first thing that goes. Similarly, product demos and those sorts of things are a great way for organisations to communicate what they're doing, demonstrate the benefit or the potential benefit, and share knowledge and learning through the work. But again, these product demos aren't being done in a way that enables that sort of activity and behaviour in an organisation. So thinking hard about those. But then also, if you're asking the team to operate in that way, how does management embody that ritual and routine as well? How does the hierarchy operate with that same visibility and transparency that will embody that behavior for their organisation? Because that then goes into the stories and myths of an organisation, that if you want your team to operate in a certain way, it's very important for leadership to role model that behavior in their rituals and routines that really strengthen that behavior for an organisation, so that staff not only can see and understand what's expected of them, but actually they have confidence that leadership are bought into this and actually are prepared to do it as well. And that's quite important. So if you don't think about all of these things, what you actually end up doing is rebuilding your same organisation in a new technology platform. So as I say, I'm going to be talking a lot more over this in the coming weeks, because I think this is quite important that we start to think about these. So what I've started thinking about is, what are those control systems in an organisation as you're going through digital transformation? What are the control systems that you have to think about? What are the power structures that you have to think about? And what are the elements that organisations have to change about themselves that will embody the behaviours and the culture of a digitally transformed organisation that they aspire to? Culture is not just about getting in a workshop and having a group hug. Culture actually is about all of these different symbols and control systems and power structures and rituals and myths and all those other elements, and how they come together to create the belief system and the way of working for an organisation. And if we don't think about it in that way, we won't embody the culture and the way of working that we're looking for. So as I say, I'm going to talk more about this. I'm going to work through some of these control systems and some of these processes more, because I think they're the elements that organisations struggle with. They're the challenges for organisations in their digital transformation journey, and they're the ones that actually I think we need to have a conversation about. So if you want to hear more as I talk more about this organisational immune system and some of these control systems, subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much for your attention today.